Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. This is a kind of a treat for us to be able to be in person after, what, 2 seasons, Deborah, of not doing remote meetings and such. So I have the mic. I want to make a very important announcement that Deborah would not make. And that is that Sean Mulaney has volunteered my bar tab over there at the bar today. Actually, Sean volunteered here, so. But anybody that wants to get a drink, it's on the house, so grab something that you'd like, okay?
So do you want to advance the slides for me?
I will.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here, and thanks especially to the Acoaxet Club back there. Thank you guys for hosting us. We were an annual meeting without a place for a little while there, which was kind of desperate. So I really appreciate them inviting us in. Sean, thank you for making that suggestion and bringing us together, and for buying the drinks. Boy, you all should be, you know. Okay, so we're here today to celebrate the year 2022 for the Westport River Watershed Alliance, which was really almost a resumption of normal life, which I think is kind of a testimony to, you know, the weird years that we've had. And why don't we go to the first slide? And this is the snapshot of our finances. And amazingly, we did really, really well this year, as we have done for the past couple of years, with the largest source of income being you all and your generosity and the contributions. So thank you all so much for everything that you've done with our organization to keep us afloat and to keep us going in all of our activity directions. Next slide. This, I think, is symbolic of the year. It was finally open, the River Center. We opened officially in end of October 2019 and went into stasis there soon thereafter. But it has been open now, and as you can see, we've got this amazing map of the watershed on the floor. If you haven't been in to see it, you really should come. We have children's activities and a place where kids can play and lots of things going on, and we've done a lot with our community engagement programs. So, next slide. We raise a fair amount of money also besides from contributions from events, and we're going to just look at a couple of events real quickly. The Winter Art Show returned to the Shattuck Gallery, and we all thank Dee Dee so much for that space and that spot, because it's a beautiful place. And artists like Susan Zernicka, who donates to us every year, are really happy to be shown in that venue. Next slide. This is Brushes and Brews. I just love this picture. They happen to have chosen the sunflower on the day before the sunflower was officially made public as the flower of Ukraine, which was interesting. So this is the fabulous artistry, and Barbara Healy here is our floor painter, as well as being Brushes and Brews. Next slide. We do a lot of community engagement events, and these are ways in which we serve the community, engage people in activities, get out and do things. One of our program partners, Cindy Wilson's very involved in the Clean Up Westport folks, and this was the annual spring cleanup, and you can see it was really chilly that day. We have one coming up April 15th, is that right? So if you're feeling like the need to do good in the community, sign up. They need lots of volunteers. It's really pretty surprising how much trash there is out there around Westport. I see it on my bike all the time. And we also do electronics recycling. That's coming up as well, April 29th behind Town Hall. And we've removed how much electronics total, Steve?
Over the years?
Yeah, like 8,000.
40,000 pounds?
40,000 pounds of electronic material over the years since we started. So this, again, we use lots of volunteers. There's Michaela and other folks. Norma, there you are, looking good. And Norma's been with us many years for that event, so thank you, Norma. Okay, we also do outdoor activities, in particular in June and October, to get people out and appreciating what we call the WOW, the wonders of the Westport watershed. This is a hike to the headwaters, and this is a hike to the dunes. So the northernmost part of our watershed is up in Freetown, and there's a boiling spring up there. And the southernmost part is down in the dune area, which is about to be again, replanted by our 5th graders. And we have t-shirts out in the hallway that are so cute. If you have grandchildren or children and you want to buy them a t-shirt, you should do that. So it's really fun. We do a summer concert every year. Livingston Taylor came last summer, and we had a wonderful event with him. And the last big fundraiser that we do is our annual gala. And many of you have been to that, and many of you have volunteered for that, so thank you for that. We also, despite all of these things are in service of doing our programs. So we've raised money in order to do our programs. And in particular, I'd like to point out two big things that are kind of gobsmacking, as they used to say in London. The first is that we work with children throughout the year in Westport for multiple visits. So we don't just do a one-time visit with kids. We go into the classrooms and work with them. We take them out on field trips. We're doing that next week to the dunes. And I just wanted to welcome Michaela and Kim, if you guys would stand up, our two. Michaela is a new staff member, but she's a Michaela's what you might call like the perfect success story. She grew up in Westport. She did our programs as a child. She was taught by a woman who she only knew as Heron. She has another name in real life, but Michaela then came back and got really excited about the environment, went to college, came back as an intern, came back for a year of service, and she's our newest, well, not quite our newest staff member in the education program. Our very newest staff member is Kim Botello. She's the education director. She's been with us, what, like 4 weeks?
Just over
4 weeks. And in that time, she's asked a lot of really great questions. She's already done a lot with social media and Facebook postings. She's rejiggered our summer programs a little bit to make them more interesting and more vibrant. And she's just a woman full of ideas. So we're really excited to have her join our staff. This is some of the kids in summer programs. I love this. And I have to say, one thing that was really inspiring for me last spring was I was at the dune grass planting day when all the 5th graders showed up. We were told 3 weeks before that day that there was going to be a field trip, and I was like, oh boy, because we need like 12 people or more to do these field days. So we rustled up every volunteer we could think of, and we got out there, and we're waiting in the parking lot of the Cherry and Webb parking area. And the kids got out of the buses, and they hadn't seen each other for a year and a half. And they were like shaking with excitement. It was so fun to see them, and to see them greeting each other and being so excited about being outdoors and doing work in the community. So this is Michaela in education programs, working with children. And let's see, this is one of the things we do is go into the river and do seining, which is this gigunda net. We drag it up the river and see what we've caught. And lately we've been catching a lot of eels. So if you'd like to see some eels, we have some in our tank. Mike Sullivan's been pressed into duty in the seining department as well as many other roles. This is Michaela in the classroom. And next slide. And this leads into our science work, which is very regular water testing for multiple years, led by Roberta, our science director. She's out in the river from June till the end of August. She's been collecting data for the organization and for the Buzzards Bay Coalition, which amasses all of that information and writes a report on the health of the river. And we also have been doing a salt marsh study for the past 3 years, which includes Mike Sullivan's hand-built tide gauges, and this is Sean Leach helping us deploy those. And those are in 10 different locations in the river. And I'm going to let Mike talk about this part now. But I have to say, here's Mike Sullivan. He's the board president. He's the chief fix-it man around the River Center. He's built these 10 tide gauges as well as deploying them. So Mike, you've done an awful lot for us in your year as president, so thank you so much.
Before we go into the science, I just want to back up a minute on the education piece. I was on the board for about a year before I realized how extensive our program is. Can't hear me? Okay. I was on the board for about a year before I realized how extensive our education program is. We touch every grade, in many cases it's like a monthly or quarterly thing, with biology, environmental science, all the way up through high school. So we're truly integrated into the Westport school system, and it really is one of the more important things that we do. I've had the good fortune of being involved with some science projects. That's how I got involved with the organization in the first place. What you're looking at here is one of the 10 tide gauges. This happens to be Sean Leach, who was conducting a measurement on this orange thing here with the black post. We had 10 of these installed in the river near salt marsh pieces that we're interested in studying. Okay, so this thing collects data of tide height and water temperature every 2 minutes, and we're putting all that data together. You put that data together from any one site. This looks a little busy, but you got 3 months of 2 tide cycles a day and how it varies, and we know where that piece of salt marsh is, so we can tell how much time it spends under the water. And interestingly, that's where this whoops. Previous. Okay. So when you take that data and you hold it against the salt marsh that you surveyed, you can tell how much time any little piece of that has spent underwater. And we haven't finished our work here, but what we're leaning towards is something that other organizations as well have come to the conclusion that our salt marshes, especially in the lower reaches of the river, are melting away because it's spending too much time underwater. It's basically being drowned. So that's not our definitive conclusion yet, but that's where this work is going. We also spent a little time over the last year and a half on the Hicks Bridge project. Now what you're looking at here is the Hicks Bridge. And underneath it, all of this reddish brownish area here, this is the pile of rubble that was left in 1938. And then we think a little bit more left in 2005 when the bridge was rebuilt for the second time. This sill, if you will, we think is restricting flow across this narrow passage. And the Army Corps of Engineers has looked into removing this. The original proposal was to take all of this material, which the depth here is like between 3 and 10 feet, take it down to 12 feet, and then dump it in these 4 holes. So what we've discovered in the work that we've done and talking with the folks here in town is that those holes are a repository for ancient, I want to say ancient, oysters that are not harvestable, too deep for the shellfishermen to get to them. So they stay there, they get large, and they throw off a lot of spat. So they actually serve as a sort of a nursery for the river. We did a dive, we did a little bit of survey work, and you can see that there's some pretty good-sized oysters down there in these tests. Okay, so those are two of the major projects that we worked on. And just to go back to the first thing, which was reverse water testing. 3 different programs, a couple dozen sites throughout the river, visited multiple times for both pathogens, which come from, say, septic systems, as well as nitrogen that comes from septic systems. So that work's been very important and it's fed into the larger studies of the area, and hopefully will help us monitor our progress on nitrogen reduction. So with that, Deborah, you want to go to our subject?
So our next subject, before we have our featured speakers, is board transitions and recognition of board members. Okay, I need the mic, apparently. All right, usually I'm so loud that, okay. So recognition of board members that are retiring from service, voting in new board members, and also renewing the term of 2 board members. So we were trying to save paper, which is why you have a program. And so this is something that we vote as a group of members of the Watershed Alliance. We're renewing the term of Wendy Nicholas Dorsey, who's over in the corner. The term of Harold Cooper, who's in Arizona. We don't want to talk about that. We're voting in 2 new board members, Cindy Wilson and Mark Lutman. I'm not sure Mark is great. And we are appreciating Carol Ann Hayes, Carol Moriarty, and Rich Castenson, who are all stepping off the board. Mike has a few things to say now about those off-going board members.
You mean all the embarrassed stuff that we rehearsed ever? No, we have 3 really long-term members who have been with us for a combined 25 plus years. And they've all fulfilled really important roles and served through a period in which they have contributed to really a transformative period for the watershed. Really in a different place than we were 9 years ago. And if I could ask, where's Rich? Rich, can you stand up here? Yeah, just watch the scene, okay? Rich, he has been the secretary of the board. He started what is now the science committee. You'd think that we would have had a science committee from the very beginning of our organization 4 years ago, but we didn't. And Rich has been the chair and the originator of that committee. And Rich, I can't thank you enough for getting us going in that direction and your leadership in this area. It's been really amazing. So how about again for Rich Cassidy? And for Connie for letting us borrow him all these years. Thank you, Connie. Okay, where's Carolyn? No, it's Carolyn. I'm going to ask you to stand up as well. Carolyn is our treasurer, and she heads up all our finance and investment activities. She leads a team that she's put together that's just, I keep saying, if you guys can get them to take a look at your own personal finances, you'll be in good shape, I'll tell you right now. The board has grown tremendously over, I should say, our finances and our assets have grown tremendously over this period to the point where we actually have to be careful and know how we're investing those things. But again, Carolyn, I can't thank you enough for such a transformative period and what a great period of service. All right. All right, where's Carolyn? Oh, there's Carolyn. Carolyn, you got to stand up now. Carol definitely doesn't want to be in the spotlight. That's how she's operated for the last 9 years. She's been involved in every one of our fundraising efforts. She's been our vice president of development for a number of years now. And really, you and your team leave us in the best place that we've ever been as far as the finances. And that includes going through a period of COVID where we really thought a lot of these activities were going to taper off and we would, wilt on the vine and so forth. But it's really been a wonderful set of accomplishments, Carol. We can't thank you enough. All right. So with that, where's Yo? Yo, would you like to join me and introduce our 2, even though they're already been voted onto the board, there'll be 2 new board members that will be starting a new 3-year term, right? Pardon me? A new 3-year term. Yeah. Thank you. So, Yo, I should introduce you first. So, Yo is our vice president, okay, and he also heads up our leadership committee, something that we did not have for a number of years. So we actually have a process by which we reach out, try to find people who might be interested in serving on the board. And I'm just so glad that this all happened after I snuck in as a board member. So, but we do have a very interesting and defined process, and I thank you for taking care of that.
Thank you, Mike. It's always been a pleasure to working with you. It's been fun, and we get a lot accomplished, I think. That's the important part. I'm here to introduce briefly the 2 new board members that I should hold it like this, I guess. the two new board members that will join us officially today. The first one is Cindy Wilson. And Cindy, why stand up for a moment? Yeah, thank you, Cindy. I have a few notes here to help me. Cindy studied at Dartmouth College, amongst others, and she moved to Westport in 2016, if I'm correct on this one. She's been already very active in the Watershed Alliance. I think I first met Cindy at one of the electronics recycling events. But she has been very active on the education side, where she's a member of the education committee. She has a background in education, which is very helpful, of course. She is also very much involved in the Clean Up Westport activity. She is co-chair of this year's gala. She is very involved in the organization of River Day. We are very happy that she's willing to join the board, because all the work she already does. Yeah, I think that was the major activity, and of course, if you want to talk to Cindy afterwards, that shouldn't be a problem at all. She'd be happy to talk to you. The second new board member that I want to introduce is Mark Ledman. Mark, can you stand up for a moment? Mark has been coming to Westport for a long time for family reasons, and he loves the river. He has been fishing, shell fishing, boating, swimming. When he moved here permanently last summer, I think, he was immediately interested in joining the Watershed Alliance. He's already been active in various things, electronics recycling, beach cleanup. He is also involved in the education activities. Mark is by profession a biologist and worked for years at GSK, particularly in the area of COPD. And he's semi-retired now. He still has some consulting work that he does, but he's been very active as well. So would like to welcome Mark, and I'm sure that if you want to have a little chat with Mark, he'll be around. That's pretty much what I have to say about the new board members. Are we going to have a vote now? So I'll make a motion to elect the two new board members and to re-elect Wendy Nicholas and Harold Cooper. By the way, I had a few conversations this morning with Harold Cooper, or Coop as he's well known. He is in Arizona. He had hoped to be here on the screen, but that wasn't possible, unfortunately. But he sends his very best wishes to everyone. All right, so I have a motion. Motion. There's a second there from Rich Gustafson. All in favor, just raise your hand. See, anybody against, raise your hand now. You're raising your hand, Steve? No. Okay, well, welcome for our new board members and for our returning board members. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're going to welcome our speakers from the Board of Health. And just acknowledge them as a real force for change in Westport, which has been a really welcome thing for the town. And Tanya and Phil are here representing the board. And we have a little something for them that they don't anticipate receiving, so I'll be right back.
While Deborah is collecting that something, I'd like to we have one more piece of official business that we need to do for the year, and that is to approve the minutes from the previous year. And usually what we do in that case is we ask for a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes and then ask for a motion to approve. So moved. So, do I have a second? Second, thank you, Caroline. Okay, so motion to dispense with the reading, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous, all right. So, the minutes from 2022, which is March 17, 22, can I have a motion to approve those minutes? And I don't know how much you all have seen about it, but it just basically says who was in attendance. We approved the minutes from the previous year, and we got a welcome message from both president and vice president. Motion and a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. All right.
So in many of our years of the annual meeting, we bestow upon an individual or a group an award. And in some cases it's been for being the environmentalist of the year, in some cases it's the volunteer of the year. This year we decided that we should recognize the Board of Health for their leadership and the development of the new septic regulations, which they're going to talk about. We commend the board for developing and implementing regulations to limit the amount of nitrogen entering the river and helping to restore and protect our waters. We applaud them for considering both short-term and long-term goals in nitrogen reduction. So here you go, guys. Thanks so much. So Tanya and Phil are going to speak now, and come on up. You have to hold the microphone if you make it close.
Okay.
All right. Cool. Just
Arrow to advance.
okay, right now. Okay. Hi. Hello. How's that? Is that good? Okay. So as advertised, I am Phil Weinberg, Vice Chair. Oh,
I think
we're
you,
back a little bit.
yeah, you've advanced a few.
Oh, but, am I going backwards? Yes.
There you go.
Okay, there I am. And have to have a lighter touch. I'll just put that down there. And I want to, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for the invitation. On a personal note, this is an opportunity for me to go on the road with a conversation, much to Deborah's distress, we've been having at the dinner table the last 5 months about DEP's regulations. And so now we're not going back? Help me out here.
Push escape, Phil, and then push back. Push the
Okay.
left key.
Okay. So I'm sure that everybody in this room has been cognizant of the furor that kind of erupted when DEP announced 2 proposals that were going to require homeowners or communities, you could kind of take your pick, to start actively engaging and taking quite expensive actions over the long term to reduce nitrogen in the river. So I want to not really talk very much at all about that furor. What I really thought in this lull, in the time between all the comments that have been submitted to DEP and waiting for DEP's reaction, to take this opportunity to talk to this audience about kind of trying to give a historical perspective and a regulatory context to what DEP has proposed, and with the hopes that whatever comes out in the future everyone will understand a little bit more. And because Passover is around the corner, I thought I would phrase this in terms of 4 questions.
A little louder.
Okay, I would phrase this discussion in terms of 4 questions. And the first one is, what is the measure of success? And what I mean by that is that, anyone who's worked on projects needs to understand what the goal is. And more particularly, how do you measure whether or not you're achieving that goal? And it's particularly important in the context of regulations because the measure of success really translates into compliance. Are you in compliance with your permit? Are you in compliance with your obligations? And the second is just a general discussion about what really is the problem with nitrogen in the river, particularly excess nitrogen, and then look at whether the draft DEP regulations align with the measure of success. Are they consistent with what we will talk about has been shown to be how you measure success in the river? And then really importantly, what strategies has the town implemented to date and is planning to do in the future to continue the success that the town has made in reducing nitrogen? So this is a picture of the measure of success of the Westport River and other estuaries. It reflects a healthy aquatic habitat that is founded in eelgrass. And eelgrass turns out to be vital and essential to having a healthy aquatic ecosystem. I'd really like this quote here that it rivals tropical rainforests and the world's richest farmlands. It's kind of like the invisible Amazon rainforest, unless the low tide gets caught in your crop, then it's not so invisible anymore. But these are the factors, the functions that eelgrass serves in terms of food and shelter and protection and nurseries for multiple species, for wildlife sources, all the ducks, the swans, and other creatures that are dependent on eelgrass fur. And then collaterally, it's also absorbing nutrients and CO2 gases. And more recently, because of the sea level rise, it provides shoreline protection. More specifically, as it relates to its regulatory significance, it's a prime indicator for excellent habitat in the way that the state classifies waterways. And Westport has the highest classification for coastal waterway, and the requirement of maintaining that classification is to have excellent habitat. And so eelgrass restoration turns out to be the compliance measure of success as well as critical from an ecosystem point of view. So nitrogen. So nitrogen itself is not really a problem for eelgrass. What happens is that algae, opportunistic, so to speak, algae come along and feed off that nitrogen, and you create algae blooms, what's called cultural eutrophication. Cultural because it comes from us, and it ends up blocking the sunlight, interfering with photosynthesis, absorbing oxygen, and basically killing off eelgrass while it prospers on the surface. And it's been documented that since the 1950s, both branches of the river had been losing significant portions of its eelgrass, the East Branch more than the West Branch. That ended up putting the Westport River on the list of impaired waterways. And not obviously only in Westport, but throughout the Cape and the South Coast, which then triggered EPA and DEP to initiate a process by which to assess and quantify what the problems were and what should be done about it. And the cornerstone of that initiative was the Massachusetts Estuary Project, which was led by the Marine Science and Technology Institute at UMass Dartmouth. And that process which took several years just in the Westport River, and they identified and quantified the nitrogen loads, both the sources and the nitrogen loads, and they established concentrations of nitrogen that were necessary to achieve eelgrass restoration. So they studied other places where eelgrass was prospering, measured the nitrogen concentration in the river, and that became the benchmark. If you achieve that kind of that level of concentration, that was a healthy environment in which eelgrass could flourish. And then they linked that loading of nitrogen to that concentration. So saying, okay, if you achieve this nitrogen load from all these sources that are discharging in the river, this is the maximum that you could load the river with in order to achieve that target concentration. DEP and EPA both formally adopted and approved the conclusions from the Mass Estuaries for the MVP report. Fast forward a few years, there was a collaboration between the planning department and the Board of Health to update the MVP report. The town finance was hiring a consultant, and a report was issued in 2020. It was limited to the East Branch, but it updated those nitrogen sources and amount, and it also evaluated a suite of potential options by which we could reduce the nitrogen. So from the MVP report shows on the left what the sources of nitrogen were and how much they contributed. And you can see 23% was the wastewater load from septic systems, the 38% was from agriculture. The other big 30% was from the atmosphere. There's a lot of nitrogen particulates in the atmosphere which end up dissolving in the river. That's the total load. On the right is the load that we're responsible for. And when you look at it on a percentage basis, 34% wastewater, 57% of agriculture, and then there's also lawn fertilizers, a little bit from our old landfill. So this is what the targeted integrated plan that the town promoted in the 20s, and it shows it a little bit of difference. Most significantly, the middle bars for agriculture decreased substantially because there was a reevaluation of what their contribution was, and the septic load remained the same. So, two big sources, wastewater and agriculture. So, circling back to this question of what is the measure of success, and what came out of the TMDL reports was that, again, that achieving the nitrogen concentration at the sentinel stations, which is the monitoring stations that was mentioned earlier, that the Alliance maintains, if you achieve the correct concentration at the sentinel stations, 2 stations of all the stations, that would restore the entire system. And the mechanism for doing that was to reduce nitrogen. So the N was achieving concentration at the sentinel stations, and the means was to reduce nitrogen. So here's where the monitoring stations are. You can see that, and there were 2 dots, one for the East Branch and one for the West Branch. Those are the sentinel stations. And so achieving eelgrass restoration was targeted to these stations and the concentration of nitrogen in the river. So how are we doing? This is the West Branch measure of concentration of nitrogen in the river. The red line marks what that concentration level is. And you can see for the past 4 years, almost all the time, we are below the concentration. That means that we are successfully reduced, or nitrogen has been successfully reduced, so the West Branch is now in compliance. This is the East Branch. The East Branch is, and if you can see how it's tracked down over time, is slightly above the concentration level. But again, it's fairly close to achieving compliance, meeting the measure of success. Okay, so let's then go back to the question that I posed, which is, well, how does the DEP's regulations match up to the measure of success? Concentration at the sentinel stations. So, so the regulations that DEP proposed came in kind of like two packages. And one was for Title V, which is the regulation that regulates septic systems. And that proposed that all system owners, all septic system owners, which is virtually every residence in town, I think we have maybe about 6,500 of them, would have to retrofit their system, upgrade their system with nitrogen-reducing technology within 5 years from the date that DEP would take steps to designate the river. But there was an option that was proposed. The other set of regulations was a watershed permit, and it shifted the responsibility from individual owners to the town. And now the town could step forward and enter into a permit with the Department of Environmental Protection, and one of the in order to reduce nitrogen and achieve water quality. But one of the big advantages of that was, instead of having 5 years to do it, the town would have 20 years to do it. So it is, and it sounds like a very good deal, and there is a lot to offer. There are a lot of benefits in the watershed permit approach, because it's kind of a whole permitting process, it's adaptive, and it's actually feasible to achieve as compared to having 6,500 septic systems be upgraded in 5 years. It's hundreds of millions of dollars to do that in a very short period of time. But the Title V permit had this condition in it, and it was a condition that in order to be eligible for the permit, you had to achieve the same amount of nitrogen reduction as if all those septic systems were converted. You didn't necessarily have to do it from the same source, that is, you could have reduced agricultural and other sources, fertilizer, but you had to do it to the same amount. So the watershed permit gave you more time, more flexibility, but you were still saddled with the same, and what I consider to be arbitrary nitrogen reduction loads. And this is where, in my opinion, I may be proven wrong, okay? My opinion is, I thought that DEP went off the track because it essentially picked this number out of the air as to the amount of nitrogen that needed to be reduced and the costs that were associated with that, without considering what the impact was on the measure of success, which is the nitrogen concentration at the sentinel stations. And for Westport, it was particularly significant because we're doing pretty darn well, at least in terms of the measure that the state has put out as to success. The West Branch is showing that it has achieved the required concentration, and the East Branch is almost there. So, so that's where we are right now. We're going to have to see what DEP. This is one of the several comments that the Board of Health submitted to DEP during the comment period, and we'll have to see if it sticks. So, in terms of moving forward, one is to engage DEP about this issue and see if we can just free the watershed permit from this obligation. Because there is going to be some more nitrogen reduction that has to be done, but does it have to be done in the amount and at the cost that the regulation seems to suggest we would have to bear as a community? Okay, so now to the good news. The good news is we have been doing a lot of great stuff, and we continue to make a lot of progress. I know people are familiar with the proposal to establish for the first time, or at least to expand a sewer system along Route 6. The first phase is to go from Fall River out to Route 88. That has now been in 90% design phase. There's a project manager hired. There's an active effort at the congressional level to obtain financing for that. One of the proposals in the integrated plan was to do a cluster system, which is kind of like a neighborhood centralized wastewater treatment system. Instead of having individual septic systems, you just build one larger system which can do a lot better job in nitrogen reduction. The lead has been a community that has expressed interest in it, and I think the Buzzards Bay Coalition is going forward looking for financing to move into the design phase. The last piece I want to mention is the agricultural nitrogen load reduction, because agricultural sources are a big part of this. And I just came across recently, actually a former colleague from DEP sent me this, a project over the last several years done by the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Districts, which worked with 6 farms in Westport, mostly doing dairy and beef raising, and did a series of manure management, stormwater, and other activities, and it yielded an incredible amount, 30,000 tons per year of nitrogen, according to this report, was removed from the river, just from 6 farms. So progress is being made, and now I want to turn over to Tanya, my chair, and talk about what the Board of Health is doing. Thank you.
I'm not a big fan of the microphone, so can you hear me if I speak loud enough? Good, thank you. Sorry about that. I get to talk about the fun stuff, what the Board of Health has been doing. With regard to reducing the nitrogen load that Phil gave you a nice overview about, and we'll talk about that in the context of what we can do at the Board of Health level. There are lots of things, we can't regulate certain things, but we can, and so I'm going to talk about those. So I'll expand on a few topics that Phil referenced. I'm not going to get too technical, but we'll have a Q&A at the end if people have questions. So I want to remind folks why we care about nitrogen reduction. Phil talked about it in the context of the river, but it's also a health impact because almost everybody in Westport has private wells. The raw nitrogen from the septic load goes also into the groundwater, and that's where we get our drinking water from. So wells that can get contaminated from excess nitrogen become unhealthy to drink, particularly for infants and elders. So that's a really important concern for the Board of Health, in addition to the river and estuary. Phil mentioned the algae blooms, what we call HAB, harmful algal blooms. Those we see, in particular in Westport, for instance, we had to close Southwood Tupper Pond last summer for recreation, for swimming and so on, and you couldn't let your pets in because of those harmful algal blooms. So that also is a health effect that we worry about. And then I'm not going to get into the details, but of course it's an economic risk. We talked about shellfishing, fishing, recreation, tourism, and real estate values. That's all affected by nitrogen pollution in the river and in our drinking water. If you have a contaminated well, that's a big problem. So our goal is not only clean a river, but also clean drinking water. Just a quick reminder, Phil already reviewed that, how nitrogen gets into the water. I'm going to focus on the left side, all those septic systems, because that's something that we, as the Board of Health, can regulate. So for 99% of us, it's flush it and forget it. For the Board of Health, we're part of that 1% that worries about the output. Because it is a major source of excess nitrogen in our groundwater and our river system. The most important step that the Board of Health has taken in the last few years is to adopt a comprehensive local septic regulation that is stricter than Title V, which is the state septic regulation, and we are allowed by statute to do that. We went through a public process, had hearings, and so on to do that. We then refined that regulation, I'm going to talk about the comprehensive local septic regulation, which was adopted in October of last year, and it consolidated and standardized a lot of previous regulations. We had some that were 20 years old, which we updated, but most importantly, we incorporated the septic system water resource protection regulation. That's a mouthful. That went into effect in February of 2021. And that's where the key nitrogen reduction provisions are located. So first of all, we set a 5-year timeline for cesspool upgrades. Why did we pick cesspools? Well, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but they're the worst polluting type of septic system. And so we get the most bang for the buck in targeting cesspool upgrades. We've been seeing a lot in the last couple of years since that regulation went into effect. Every meeting where we approve new septic plans or upgrades, we are regularly seeing cesspool plans, or plans to upgrade cesspools coming through. So we're making good progress there. The other end of the spectrum is new construction. Anytime you build a new house, you're adding septic load, right? You have got 3 or 4 bedrooms, which is the way we measure septic load. That adds to the nitrogen load. So all the progress we make on one end can be wiped away by the added load that comes in from new construction. So we also targeted new construction and required the adoption of, or the incorporation of nitrogen reducing septic systems for all new construction, which also includes expansion when you're adding bedrooms. And that's important because on average, just an average, Title V septic system produces 64 milligrams per liter of nitrogen in its effluent, the output end, versus 19 is the standard for nitrogen reducing systems that have been approved by DEP, what's called general approval. There are some newer technologies that maybe get down to 10 or 12 milligrams per liter as a standard, but you can see just requiring advanced nitrogen reducing septic systems reduces the impact of that new load significantly. So, cesspools, I call them outhouses with indoor plumbing, because that's really what they are. It's a pit in the ground with holes. The solids stay there, and the raw sewage goes out through those holes into the surrounding soil. So it's a concentrated source. There is no treatment. So you get the full shebang from a cesspool, which is why we targeted those. Cesspools have been banned in all 50 states. They have not been allowed in Massachusetts for over 45 years. So if you still have a cesspool, you have a very old system. A lot of the cesspools are on older, smaller lots, and often they're in the water table. So that poses an even greater risk on the drinking water, because that's where you're pulling your drinking water from, and particularly when older might have shallow wells. So that's cesspools. Here's just a graphic to show you, this is from the targeted plan that Phil mentioned. Those black diamonds are identified contaminated wells, and you see them clustered in the areas where the proposed phase 1 and phase 2 of the sewer system is. That would be a huge bonus, not only to cleaning up the river, because the headwaters bread and cheese brook are come through there, but also to address drinking water contamination. And these are only the wells we know about that people have had to test. Sometimes we require testing as part of a septic upgrade, or people voluntarily tested and we have the results. But there's a lot of wells that don't get regularly tested, so the problem is probably worse than we're showing. And then other concentrated areas of well contamination are down at Westport Point and at the Let. So we're doing cesspool outreach. You see a FAQ document on your table. That's with the thanks of the Watershed Alliance, and really appreciate their support. We reviewed all of our septic files, but they're all still on paper. Manually, so Phil and myself and Donna Emerald, our other board member, as well as some staff time, went through and reviewed every single file. What we were able to confirm is 216 cesspools in town, based on, either on the plans on file or based on pumping records. We're gonna do a mailing with the help of the Watershed Alliance to all of those cesspool owners, reminding them of, now you only have 3 years left until the deadline. So it would be good to get started. And we have a lot of resource information on our website. We also, however, have at least 700 properties where we have no plan on file. Most of those are houses built before 1960. A lot of them are going to be cesspools. So the problem is still pretty substantial. So the other end, I talked about new construction. This is just a graphic that was produced by the Buzzards Bay Coalition when we were developing the regulation initially, to show you the difference in load. And we looked at the amount of septic plans we approved in July to September of 2020 before our initial reg passed. And the pace of construction, new construction, really picked up. We had 14 plans that we approved. 11 of them were 4-bedroom, 4 of them were 3-bedroom. So that translate that load of a standard Title V system, which all those were approved before the regulation is standard Title V, versus what would be the output from a nitrogen reducing system. So you can see that load from new construction is really significant. Just a quick graphic. This is I borrowed from George Hoyfelder, which is from the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Testing Center in Barnstable, just to show you what a denitrifying septic system adds that treatment unit, which various technologies, but often using bacteria to work on that nitrogen that's in there, converts it mostly to nitrogen gas rather than the nitrates, the NO3, into the soil. Just briefly talk about a policy that we have. It's called Maximum Feasible Compliance Policy. And I just want to mention that one because that targets, again, situations where we have an undersized lot, an existing system, whether it's a cesspool or a failed Title V system, and if there is a well that is contaminated on that property, then we typically will require a nitrogen reducing septic system to be incorporated because of that a demonstrated contamination. The Board of Health also recognizes that upgrading your septic system, if it's failed, whether it's a cesspool or not, is expensive. We participate in 2 programs. One is the Community Septic Betterment Loan Program. That's a 5% loan up to over 20 years. You can pay that back. And that's authorized at town meeting, so thank you for those who voted yes for that. We borrow the money from the state and then in turn lend it out to homeowners. We also got permission to use the proceeds from a grant, an earlier septic grant program, to allow 1% low interest loans from low and moderate income homeowners who need to upgrade their failed septic system to a denite system. So it's an incentive program targeted to that. So just summary, we have a local septic regulation that's going to help the town achieve that total maximum daily load that we talked about, that Phil talked about earlier. It implemented one of the Tier 1, the primary recommendations from the town integrated water management plan. And then we have policies that I just briefly mentioned that help support homeowners when upgrading. So this proactive approach to addressing nitrogen pollution will benefit the environment, our health, and the community, and it positions us well for any potential future regulatory regime that may come out, because we have been really proactive. Westport's the only community on the South Coast that has no sewer right now, so we're really reliant on upgrading septic systems. I'm hoping that, the next step, that we as a community will support that sewer project on Route 6, because wastewater treatment plants are the most effective way of reducing nitrogen load, and so that will get really a huge benefit from that. Phil was talking about fertilizer reduction as part of the effort on the agricultural front, but we also all use fertilizers. I'm trying not to, but everybody can reduce their fertilizer use. That's not a big slice of the source of nitrogen load, but it's one that we can all, as individual homeowners, be cognizant of. Another one, a potential future action, not imminent at this point, but it's one of the recommendations out of the targeted plan that the Board of Health could work on together with the planning board, which is sort of targeting strips along the river, which is where the most impact from septic load is going to go right into the river, to require pre-1995 septic systems to upgrade to nitrogen reducing technology. So that could be a future phase.
Why 1995?
Because that was the last change, upgrade, if you will, in the Title V regulation. So before 1995, we could still have leaching pits with tanks and so on. So from that forward, there was better protection through the requirements. So what can you do now? You could do a voluntary septic upgrade, especially if your property is close to the river. That will send a message that you care about the environment and you want to do your part. Regular septic maintenance, pump every 3 years. More often if you've got a lot of laundry loads or a lot of people living in the house, don't flush stuff like medicines, paints, toxic cleaners into your sink or in your toilet, because it comes out the other end and the Board of Health cares about that. Reduce or eliminate fertilizers on lawn and garden. Try no-dig gardening. I'm going to try that this year. Reduce lawn area, plant meadows instead. And thank you for Representative Schmidt to being here, because I'm going to address the next one to you. You can all lobby Senator Rodericks and Representative Paul Schmidt, who's here, to support Governor Healy's proposal to increase the septic tax credit. For people who have to upgrade their failed septic system, there is currently a $6,000 tax credit over 4 years, up to $6,000 over 4 years. The proposal is to increase that to $12,000. That's a big help, and I would really, that would help Westport in particular because we have so many septic systems. So I would really encourage, if you're not in Westport but in another community, encourage your local legislative delegation to support that in Governor Healy's proposal. And lastly, I'm just a little inspiration. This is advanced treatment denitrifying septic system that happens to be on my property. My husband and I voluntarily did an upgrade in 2020. So that's the treatment and septic tank. It's a 2-compartment tank in that big square block there. And behind it you can't really see, but we converted a lot of our lawn to a meadow. So we only have to mow once a year. We don't use any fertilizer. We have a meadow in our backyard too. Makes life a lot easier. And I just want to say, we had our effluent, the output from our septic system after treatment tested last summer, and we achieved 0.99 milligrams per liter, which is, the standard is 19. So you can really achieve very good reduction if you're conscientious about maintenance and don't flush anything down the toilet and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, it can be a very effective. We picked a technology that, based on our research, was the best performing technology, but it's still only approved at the 19 level, and we achieved much better. So I hope that's a little bit of inspiration. Think about that. We're happy to answer questions, both Phil and myself, about anything we've talked about today or not talked about today, having to do with septic systems. And thank you very much.
I'm sure there's some questions for Phil and Tanya. Does anybody want to? Okay, over here. Ken.
I got two questions. The first one is on the residential septic site. How much will removing the cesspools move the needle? What contribution will that take by itself?
Did everybody hear the question? So the question was, if we move forward to get rid of all of these cesspools, how much will that move the needle?
I don't have a concrete, like, how many pounds, because we didn't know how many how many cesspools are in town. We know for sure there's 216. We think there's a lot more, but we've just completed the process of reviewing all those files. So I don't have a concrete measure, but I do know that cesspools have the highest nitrate load because there is no treatment at all. So it's sort of, rather than making everybody upgrade, let's focus on the worst sources. So I do know that.
So it could be a big contribution. We just don't know.
The cesspools are a significant contribution. I don't have a concrete number.
Second question, I'll try to shout it out. Is there any economic or financial incentive programs planned to help on the agricultural front to basically provide incentives for best practice?
That's not an area that I know a lot about. I think Phil referenced that report that was done by the conservation districts. Where that funding came from to do that, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a suite of grants, both federal and state, that have been very helpful to farmers. Is River Rock Farm one of the 6 that is on
They
there?
don't mention the names of the farms in the report.
Okay, I presume it is because we've done a bunch of things using some of that grant money.
I would just add that, I think somewhat similar to energy savings, which is that a lot of these best management practices end up saving money for the farmer. And so I think part of the success of this program, that it did contribute, there was a portion of it grant money, there was support in the farmers getting in financing some of the things, which are not major things, but but in also successfully making the case that doing this in the long term would be productive for the farm.
Thanks.
Add a note to that. We sponsored, with your support, getting this service started. We're working with the farmers and with the agricultural commission or committee here in town, identified farms and worked with the local agent. And so that got the whole thing started about 4 or 5 years ago. And that's what led into these results.
Ken, on your first question about the cesspools, I'm going to defer to. Does the MEP study, does it contain granulated information on us so that we could somehow pull out the cesspool component?
No, but it certainly could be modeled going forward if they anticipate the number of systems and then they plug in a general wastewater load allocation. Boom, we could come up with that number quickly.
The water plant could too, the targeted integrated water plant, which updates the MVP report.
I mean, I showed, I had helped model in the impact of regular Title V to D-night systems.
Yeah.
The similar kind of thing can be done, but we haven't done it. That's not my area of expertise.
Any other questions? Jim?
I just wanted to add a little bit to the sewer and the community septic programs.
Jim, say who you are.
Jim Whiten, I'm the chair of the planning board in front of it. And we have just, on the 15th, applied for a $5.5 million grant from a congressionally targeted program. And through our congressional delegations. And I don't know if we'll be successful. We might get some, we might get the 5.5, which would, when we cobble together other sources of income, would allow us to do the first stretch of sewer from Fall River to about 88, which is the backbone of our future sewer. Secondly, we applied in February for a $300,000 grant for the Budget Bay National Restoration Project through the EPA to do a final engineering plan for the left, which is First, Second, and Third Streets, just south of Bayside Restaurant, including Bayside Restaurant. And I think we have a good chance of getting that also. If we talk about sewer all the way down to around the Dartmouth line and all the neighborhoods that are near here and on small lots, we're talking probably about 2,000 residences. It would be full offices, which would get us a long way to getting the nitrogen down to what the TNBL says. Also provide economic development and also clean water. So I think those things are good. The big question will be how do we pay for it? That's going to be 70, 80, 90 million dollars. And I don't think it's fair to ask those folks up there to pay for it all when we're all going to benefit. So we're going to have to find out a way to share the cost. Thanks.
One of the things that probably don't know, but when you go to an event like this, there's supposed to be a signage for all the public officials, so that somebody like me, can then introduce everybody. And when I used to show up as a selectman, I said, now I realize what a pain in the neck it is. You haven't recognized some of the people that are here that are friends of the Watershed. So first of all, I'd like to thank Paul Schmidt, our representative. And we also have, as you mentioned, two members of the planning board. We have Jim White, Manny Swords. Did you stand up, guys? I want the people. Anybody else? Okay. So more questions for Phil and Time. Oh.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
my first, I think I can do it, my wife tells me I have a loud voice, so you can probably hear me. My question is really, if the DEP regulation stands and the 20-year program has to have the same reduction as the 5-year program, how much reduction in the total nitrogen load in Westport would actually that 5-year plan create? Because it's only a fraction of the nitrogen load in Westport, which is coming from septic systems.
So that is really an unknown number now, and part of the reason that it's an unknown number is that the regulation requires that the upgrades incorporate the best available nitrogen reducing technology. There is no real definition of what that is. DEP has not said what that is, and as Tanya was pointing out, before that regulation, there was a generally, the DEP approved all its advanced technologies at 19 milligrams per liter. Now, this program was, this concept of requiring everybody to install the best technology has its good side to it, which is that it's designed to encourage companies that provide this technology to do better. Because if they've got the technology that is the lowest, then they're going to have a commanding place in the marketplace. The other side of it is that right now we don't know what it is, and it's not connected to any kind of cost limit as well. And so, don't know the answer to that. And we'll just have to see. I think that's one of the mysteries.
One question over here.
I have a very basic question. Does the Board of Health recommend how often our private wells should be tested? And I ask that out of concern for cesspools or failing wells or failing septic systems on the point. Thank you.
A lot of people never test their wells until they have to sell the property. Usually there's a well testing requirement then. I would recommend that you do it every couple of years, or at least get a baseline measure, and then, you know, periodically check after that. If your baseline measure has either pathogens or high nitrate levels, then you know, then you need to think about actions. And there are treatments you can put drilling on a well to reduce nitrates, but you know, that's not addressing the source problem. So I certainly recommend. We do have lists of approved labs in you know, that on our website, so you can go look them up and get the testing information and the pricing there.
Thank you.
Dave, you have a question?
Well, I'd like to make 2 points. One is that Tanya and I, we have the same kind of treatment system. I've had mine for 10 years, and I get it tested every time it's inspected, which is every 6 months. And it averages about 10 parts per million. And so if you get 65 or 70 out of raw sewage, why, you get it reduced from 70 down to 10 by putting in a denitrifying system. So that gives you a basis for you to work on your own. Oh, sure, on them. But I just, on the state of the present way, most importantly for us in Westport, is that it has, towards the end of it, a discussion following up on Phil's eelgrass, and it reports that there are a few areas that stand out in this eelgrass recovery story. Most notably, more than half of all new eelgrass acres resulted from a dramatic expansion of the Westport rivers, particularly in the West Branch, which added 200 acres of eelgrass over this 10-year period. So, and I live on the river, that's why I have a denitrifying septic system. We have a healthy crop of eelgrass. We've got a lot of the mute swans that used to be over here in Cocky's Pond have moved over there with us. I welcome them. We also get ducks and geese, and I think they help develop the eelgrass. But you'll see little maps in here that show that the West Branch has really had a wonderful expansion of eelgrass over the last 10 years. And as you said, that is the ultimate measure of success. So we've got a success story right here in our front yard. And but now we need to clean up the East Branch, and that gets into the sewering and the septic tanks that you're talking about. So we're partway there, and we just need to keep going.
Excellent, thank you, David. Are there any other questions for our guests tonight? If not, I'd like to make a couple comments here. first of all, all of you know somebody here on the board, and you've had some introduction to our employees, but let's start off. Some of our employees haven't been introduced. So we have started with Deborah. Can you stand, Deborah? Our executive director who leads a great team. She's been with us for how many years? 8 years. 8 years. And can't thank you enough. You've already had Roberta introduce Anna. Roberta is our science director. 19 years. Okay. So she's overseen this water testing program for a very, very long time, and she's been involved in a lot of other projects. So keep staying here, guys. We already met Kim. You already met Kim tonight. Please stand up. Our new science director, or our new education director. Now you have not met today. You have not met. We're Steve. There's Steve Connors, our outreach director. And where's Jennifer?
She's out there.
She left?
No, she's
No,
not.
she's resting her back.
Okay, Jennifer Lynch, not here. We still give her a hand. She is the person who holds all the paper in the office, and is probably the person who talks to when you call and have any questions. Okay, so this, all of us have the privilege to work with Officer McHale. McHale, who I just said the other day is no longer the new kid because she's been here for 2 years, and hopefully we'll get close to that. So, as board members, we all have the privilege of working with these folks, but I would like to say that this board is really very interested in pretty cool work. All these folks, and we have 15 or 16 folks here tonight. We lost 3 as of today, but they're all very involved. This is a working board. And if I could ask everybody to stand up, I'm not going to introduce you all. Please stand up so people can see who you are.
We're just going to ask that the board members stay for a very brief millisecond of a meeting in which we'll vote in the officers for the upcoming year. And we thank you all very much for coming today. I mean, honestly, last year we were doing this over Zoom, so this feels so much better. And I'm just glad to see all these faces and reconnect with everybody. So thank you, and thank you, Acoaxet Club, Sean, and Mike for hosting
I have
us.
to say, before you all you guys, all this work is possible because of your participation, your generous contributions, your membership, and your participation in all these events that we have. The reason why this organization exists started 4 years ago in an effort to prevent, believe it or not, a septic treatment facility up on the East Brainstone, which is the whole property. And that was called the Westport River Defense Fund at that time. It was successful in blocking that effort. The organization carried on all this time as the Westport River Watershed Alliance. And I think the reason that it has continued to be as successful as it is and not melt away is because this river system here represents about a quarter of all of the estuary systems within Buzzards Bay. So we have the jewel of Buzzards Bay right here. So I think our mission continues to be to try to be local and be relevant. That's why we're involved with the local science center, the advocacy, and the education. So we can only do that through your assistance and participation and generous contributions. So thank you all very much. And ask yourselves to give yourself a hand for that. Thank you.
Mike, can I just say, you did introduce Jim White and Manny Soares as members of the planning board, but I just wanted to say that the work that they and the other members of the planning board are doing for the water and sewer along Route 6 is so monumental if we can pull it off, and we're all going to have to be part of the program at some point, but to have water and sewer along Route 6 will make such a difference from the quality of the water on the river, but it'll also allow us to bring some commercial development to Westport, which we desperately need to broaden our tax base. And finally, it'll allow us to do some housing, to do some affordable housing, housing for seniors, housing for veterans that we desperately need in Westport, so that all of us can continue to age and live in Westport as our circumstances change. So I just wanted to tip my hat to what Manny and Jim are doing.
Hi, I'm active on the COW committee, Clean Our Westport, that's up and coming. It's April 12th. If anybody can just take some time and go out, pick up the trash on your local roads, that would make such a difference in the cleanliness of Westport. Martin Costa's in charge of that. My name's Nona Fernald. Cindy over there is also working with us, so it's important to us to pick up the trash. It's awful when you walk around and look at it. It's awful.
What's the date again?
April 12th.
15th.
13th?
15th.
15th.
Yeah.
It's a
Saturday
morning from 9 to 12.
So it's tax.
Yeah.
Tax day, we should get out.
That's my pen now. I just want to let everybody know this is actively working. Okay? Thanks.
No, I just also wanted to say hello and recognize Peg Gillespie, who you all might know, and who has been involved. This year, we're really proud that we are going to award 10 to 12 scholarships to children for our summer programs, which Kim is now working on, really making them very exciting, and those children will be able to participate free of charge through the Gay Gillespie Summer Scholarship. So that's all part of our legacy.